Chapter 3, Oaths, Secrets, Wounds, Uncertainty. The horses of Henry and Sam rode slowly, almost at a trot, as they reached the entrance to the Duke of Wyre's mansion, one day in the evening, after a few days of riding without hardly stopping. Sam noticed the emotion on Henry's face when he saw before him the imposing facade of the sumptuous residence. The house had 2 stories and a basement, and on its front side, or facade, had a central 3-bay projection, with an attic story and a pediment, and further projecting 2 bay-angle pavilions. These pavilions had broad Doric giant pilasters at the angles, at the outer angle coupled and with a kind of turret with some castellation. The central projection had giant angle pilasters too. When they reached the foot of perron that led to the entrance, Henry and Sam stopped the horses and stable boys approached them to receive the reins and take care of the horses. Another employee went up and went into the house to warn of the arrival of important visitors. Henry and Sam went up the perron and entered the entrance hall, which had a roof 40 feet high with Corinthian pilasters and Baroque decoration. The butler came out to meet them, an old man, more or less tall, corpulent, and a little fat. He was a man with a face that in his youth had been attractive, very manly, and a little hard, but now had softened a bit by aging, furrowed with wrinkles and red cheeks. His hair was grey and he had a growing baldness. The butler dressed elegantly, appropriately for the butler of a master like his, a great nobleman. "Lord Henry, it's a pleasure to see you," the butler said, sounding genuinely cheerful, respectfully but affectionately, while bowing. "The pleasure is mine, I'm glad to see you, Frank, as always," Henry replied with kindness and sincerity. "I'm afraid His Grace forgot to notify me of your arrival, but I'll make sure that in a short time everything is ready to receive you properly, so you can rest from your trip, my lord," replied Frank, the butler. "It's not William's fault, I'm afraid it's my fault. I did not tell William about my visit, it will be a surprise for him," said Henry with a small smile. "I understand, but you do not fear, my lord, soon we will have ready your usual bedroom and if you want it, a bath as you like," said Frank. "Thank you, Frank. Is William not here?" Henry asked with apparent serenity but with some hidden anxiety. "No, my lord. His Grace went to Polton to meet with his lawyer and resolve several pending issues, but he should not be long in coming," answered Frank. "I see, well, let me introduce my servant Sam, he's like a friend to me, even as if he were from the family," Henry said, exchanging a meaningful look with Sam and then seeing Frank again. "That's why I asked that you treat him well." "Of course, my lord," Frank answered with a small bowing addressed to Henry. "Now please my lord, allow me to serve you with a small snack, while they prepare your room and your bath, or else His Grace will reprimand me, and rightly so, for not having honored the hospitality of this great house with the best friend of His Grace," added Frank. A little more than an hour later, William arrived at the house, dismounting from the horse, passing a leg over the head of the animal, flaunting his skill as a rider, as he usually did. He entered the residence with a firm step and had only walked a little when Frank came to meet him. "Frank, I'm exhausted, really that damn lawyer knows how to leave me exhausted and bored. I will have dinner a little earlier to go to sleep earlier than usual. Tomorrow I will have another hard day of work with the administrators of my properties. Make them prepare my bath," said William without stopping while walking to his office with a leather bag full of documents under his arm. "Of course, but Your Grace, we have a surprise visit," Frank replied, walking next to his master. "A surprise visit? My sister?" William asked curiously and a little confused, as he stopped and turned to see his butler. "No, Your Grace, it's Lord Henry," Frank replied, trying to disguise the satisfaction he felt in surprising his master and studying his face to see his reaction. "Lord Henry? How strange, he did not announce his visit, did he arrive a long time ago?" William asked, rather bewildered. "A little more than an hour ago," Frank answered. "Did he come alone?" William asked. "Only a servant accompanies," Frank answered. "Where is he now?" said William. In his bedroom, but he must be about to go down. Your Grace, Frank replied. Then I'll hurry to get ready to have dinner with him. I have not seen him for months, said William. Everything is ready in your rooms, Your Grace, said Frank. Thanks, Frank. William went to his room to clean up himself and change his clothes. Not long after, William lowered. He had dresses elegantly and found his friend Henry dressed in the same way. Both greeted each other effusively. What a pleasant surprise, Henry. You have not come here for 4 months, and I'm glad you came, but you should have told me, to receive you as you deserve. I would have liked to be here. When you arrived, I would have postponed my meeting today, said William affectionately. Excuse me for presented myself without warning, but it was a trip that came up unexpectedly. I hope not to disturb your routine a lot with my inopportune arrival, Henry replied with a shy smile. Do not say foolishness. Nothing pleases me more than your presence. You are one of the few reasons why I miss the South. I would love for you to move to the North to see you frequently, said William with the happiness that comes from being with a dear friend. They dined alone in the spacious dining room of the mansion, sitting side by side to talk at ease. Like other times in which he had visited William in the years since the tragedy, Henry could not help but contemplate with sadness the large table in the now almost empty dining room, comparing it with the happy years when the guests were usual in the mansion and that same table was often occupied by many diners. Always on those occasions came to his mind those children's stories about castles or mansions that had lived happy times and suddenly had fallen on them diabolical curses or hexes that had turned them into dark and enchanted places, in which darkness and pain reigned where light and happiness had reigned before. Often in those stories was a sweet and innocent princess who returned possession of those places from to light and joy. Would it be his sister who would break the spell caused by the tragedy and return life to that mansion and especially his master? While they talked about everyday and mundane things, and even laughed at times, Henry was anxious and could not help feeling guilty thinking about what he would have to do next, how he would have to sink the knife into his friend's soul to reopen old wounds of the past, and I was scared of having to reveal his own heart to him. Henry had mixed feelings and very tempestuous. And he felt guilty because the proposal he had made to his father as a salvation for his sister's misfortune was actually something he had thought about several times in the past and had wanted. Because seeing Jane married to his friend William was a desire he had felt, an idea that had sometimes hovered in his mind but that he had discarded. That would have been nonsense until a few days ago because his sister would have reacted horrified to the idea of marrying a man she did not know and one of whom she had only heard disturbing things, and also his friend William would not have even considered the possibility of doing it. But his sister's misfortune had changed everything radically. In one night the life of their entire family had been altered and now a door had opened and he did not know where it would take them. After dinner, William and Henry sat in 2 armchairs in a room in front of a fireplace, drinking whiskey. William looked at his friend, at a moment when he was silent and thoughtful, and knew that Henry was worried. Henry, what's the matter? You and I know each other too well and for a long time so that one of us knows when the other is not right, when there is something that disturbs the other, and I know that there is something that you are very worried. I noticed it since we greeted each other and at dinner even though you tried to hide it. For me it was evident that you were sad and absent, and I do not know why I think it has something to do with your unexpected visit. Just something very serious could push you to come to the North in a way so hasty and unforeseen, said William affectionately and sincerely worried about his friend. Henry sighed and put his almost empty glass of whiskey on the table, and looking at the fireplace he began to speak. You're right, my dear William. I've always been an open book for you, Henry said and smiled amusedly as he turned to see his friend, but immediately turned serious again. Something happened. A few days ago my father celebrated one of his famous hunts. You know how he is, you know how are those meetings that he organizes with the excuse of hunting, the luxury splurge to impress his illustrious guests and that everyone sees that he is one of the richest men in England, he added wryly. Yes, I know. I remember very well the sumptuous parties of your father, William replied with a small smile and a certain sadness and nostalgia. Well, The fact is that my father was the host of one of those events, and many people came. Among the guests, there was a banker from Salisbury who brought with him a nephew of his. Henry said, and remembering the guilty bastard of the misfortune of his sister, his face was covered with hatred and anger which did not go unnoticed for William. The fact is that one of the last nights of that damn meeting, the nephew of the banker, that damn son of a bitch, got into my sister Jane's bedroom and tried to rape her. Furious and indignant, Henry added. William was shocked by the surprise. His eyes opened and his face was covered with a gesture of surprise and scandal, and it took a few moments to react. But how is it possible? How is it possible that this scoundrel has dared to do something similar? But your sister? Exclaimed William, very disturbed. No. No, that damn pervert did not get his goal. Fortunately, I was alerted in time by a servant of the house, that he happened to see when he went into my sister's bedroom. I burst into the bedroom just in time, and I gave the damn bastard a beating. I hit him without mercy, and if it had not been for the intervention of the servants I would have killed him, and that's what I should have done. I should have beaten him to death. I should have killed him like a damn pig, like what he is, but if I see him again I do not think I can contain myself. That filthy bastard was stalking my sister probably from the first moment he saw her. We suspect he had to bribe a servant of the house, or that he must have seduced to some maid, and so he managed to find out where in the house was my sister's bedroom, and I wait for the night to try to commit his infamous act, said Henry, telling the truth half-heartedly and lying in part. That is terrible. But I imagine that that damn bastard is in jail, that will be judged by his baseness, William replied. I would like to, William. But unfortunately the infamy of that cowardly scoundrel knows no limits. When he was captured by my father's servants after I hit him, that son of a bitch shouted before all the guests that he had not tried to rape my sister, and that he had courted her and almost seduced, and that she agreed with him that he went to her bedroom, Henry said indignantly. William could not help but show a suspicious gesture on his face, and that did not go unnoticed by Henry. My sister is innocent, William. It's a damned lie of that infamous coward. Jane is a pure and innocent girl, the purest soul I've ever met, except for Joseph, Henry replied, and in his last words he lowered his tone and his voice broke for the emotion. William shuddered when he heard the name of his late son in the voice of his friend, and a gesture of surprise and pain covered his face, while his eyes moistened. He had to look away to calm down and suppress the urge to cry. I'm sorry, what I want to say is that my sister is not a shameless seduced by lust. She is a pure and innocent being, and I can swear it, for my children, who are what I love most in this life besides her, Henry said, excited and sincere. I believe you, Henry. I apologize if I gave you the impression that I doubted. But you all are a respectable family, and that scoundrel without honor cannot have credibility. His accusation will surely be implausible, replied William with empathy. The problem is that several guests have business with that bastard's uncle. You know that many people who presume of their blood and lineage have no money or have financial problems, and get into debt with banks. Some of those guests have mortgages with the uncle of that scoundrel, and they fear to lose their property, and others hope to obtain loans from him. So the man has pressed some guests to say they saw my sister talking a lot with his nephew in those days, and that she seemed receptive to the supposed courtship of that bastard. Of course, that's a lie. My sister naturally conversed with him a couple of times in those days, as a good hostess, but there was never courtship and much less infatuation of my sister for that man, she said, Henry lying again to cover up his sister. Then Henry continued to tell William about the difficult situation of his family and in particular of his sister, insisting on the repercussions of the scandal. So my father insists on exiling my sister Jane to Jamaica, prefer that to having to pay his money to some opportunistic scoundrel who is willing to marry a girl allegedly dishonored in exchange for money. You know how my father is inflexible and very hard, and does not forgive what he considers personality flaws. Although Jane was the favorite of his daughters, he will never forgive her for having humiliated him before society, for having dragged his family's sacred reputation for mud. Nothing will soften his heart, and this is something that is breaking my heart. I simply cannot separate myself from little Jane. She is my favorite sister. In reality, she is the only one of my sisters that I have loved with devotion. She is more than a sister to me. She is like my daughter or the other half of my soul. There are only two people in the world to whom I have felt so close, to her and to you, William. I could not give up any of you, and if Jane goes to Jamaica and I do not see her again in many years or never again, I would die a little. I need to have her with me, here in our homeland, said Henry with his voice broken by emotion, with a gesture of deep sadness in the face and a tear that he could not repress furrowing his cheek. William saw him with deep compassion, feeling as if his friend's pain was his own because he knew too well what it meant to lose the most beloved of his heart. Henry, it really breaks my heart to see you like that. You are also very important to me, you are one of the people I have loved the most in my life. Believe me that if I could do something to avoid this pain I would do it without hesitation. If that would serve as something, I would be willing to break my exile here in the north and travel to the south to meet with your father to try to convince him, to beg him that he not to do something so cruel to your sister, but I also know your father and I know that my words would not change his decision. But if you think it could be useful, said William. No, it would not do any good, but there's something you can do, although it's not conventional and it would need a lot more from you, Henry replied anxiously and with an intense look. William saw him with curiosity and certain nerves. Henry, if you ask me to hide your sister in one of my properties, I will do it even if it means problems for me and earn me the enmity of your father, but I do not think it is a wise course of action. Your father has all the rights to his daughter, Jane is his property as any of his mares could be, and forgive me for the comparison. And with how stubborn he is, I'm sure he will denounce the escape of your sister and will not stop pressuring the authorities so that they look for his wayward daughter, even if they register all my properties. Surely he will not mind making the scandal worse with a public legal war, and although I do not care to be dragged into a scandal after all I've lived, that will not do any good in your family, especially your poor mother and even your sister who would have to live like a fugitive from the law, explained William, concerned and sincere. I know, William, and that's not exactly what I have in mind. William, many years ago, at the worst moment of your life, you made an oath, you gave me your word that you would do anything for me, anything that I asks you, that the day I need you how a day you needed me, you would pay your debt of honor with me sacrificing your own life if necessary, and I never doubted your word, said Henry, serious and almost solemn, with broken voice for the emotion. William held his gaze, also serious and excited, with some intrigue reflected in his face. Of course, I will honor my word, Henry, although many years have passed and although I already thought that I would never have the opportunity to repay everything you have done for me. You know that I will do it for honor, but also for affection and loyalty to you, but I confess that I am surprised that you mention it now, and in this context, but if it is to help that sister whom you love so much and for your own peace, I will do it even at a high price for me, William replied with emotion, solemnity and a certain curiosity. Henry's face reflected mixed feelings, with bright eyes and a slight tremor, running through his face and especially his jaw. His body also trembled and he had to put his hands together so that the trembling of them would not leave him in evidence. His face paled and he tried to open his lips to speak, but could not. Although brief, the silence became thick and unsettling, and William changed the gesture of his own face for one of alarm and concern to see the appearance of his friend. Henry cursed himself in his mind and made an effort to master his emotions and his body and gather strength to speak. And finally, he got it. William, I ask you. I beg you to marry my sister, said Henry, managing to calm his voice a bit and with a serious and determined gesture on his face. William's eyes opened and his face covered with surprise, but soon the surprise was replaced by anger and William's gaze reflected a deep rage. I hope this is a damn joke in bad taste, William exclaimed, still controlling the tone of his voice but transmitting his anger without having to shout yet. No, it is not. I need you to marry my sister, Henry retorted as determination and courage began to replace fear and pain in him. You are crazy. How dare you? William yelled furiously as he stood up. "You said you would give your life for me if necessary. I do not ask for your life. Just marry my sister Jane," Henry replied, standing up and facing William. "I cannot believe that of all the people of the world you are the one who dares to ask me this. You who know all that I have suffered. You who know that I swore that I would never marry again in my life." William exclaimed loudly. "An oath born of pain and despair. An oath, to punish yourself. Is that oath more important to you than an oath born of the love and gratitude you felt for me?" Henry replied, almost hurt. "Don't say nonsense, Henry. I would give my last drop of blood, give everything I own, my heritage, my honor and my name to honor the word I gave you. But not this," William said furiously as he took a few steps away from Henry, avoiding his accusing eyes. "Do you prefer to die than to marry a girl who is an angel of goodness incarnated on earth? Do you prefer to die than having the privilege of joining your life to the life of a pure and beautiful being? Do you prefer to die than you give your caresses to a sweet girl instead of giving them to those dirty whores you sleep with? Do you prefer that I ask you to die instead of being asked you live again? Have you degraded yourself so much, William? So much that you prefer to embrace death and wallow in the filth of that dark life of whores, alcohol, and isolation? Damn fool, I'm asking you to come back to live!" Henry yelled furiously, approaching his friend and clenching his fists. "I do not want to go back to live, fucking stupid. I have no right to live. I have no right to live and be happy when my son is dead. I have no right because I am also responsible for his death. I have no right, after what I've done. I just want to die. I want to die slowly, and you're right. I want to die demeaning myself. I want to drag me for mud. I want to surround myself with the scum because I'm also scum. I'm very happy in my degradation and I do not want to escape from it, and I do not want to drag anyone with me. Just let me die in peace," William said angrily, and at last, he looked away to see the fireplace. "I do not believe you. The truth is that you are afraid. You are afraid to live. You're afraid to love again because you do not want to lose someone again like you did 11 years ago. That's why you do not want to love a woman again and do not want to father children again, because you are paralyzed by the fear of losing what you love, not its guilt, resentment, or vice that condemns you. It's the damn fear you feel," Henry replied, upset. "Shut up, you stupid bastard. You do not know what you're saying," William shouted, turning to see him with an angry look. "Yes, I know. You were always a brave man, William, but now you act like a coward. The fear of loving and losing what you love does not allow you to live," Henry shouted, trembling with anger and emotion. "Fool! What do you know about losing what you love most in life? You have no idea what it means to lose your reason for living. You have never lost someone you love, you have always had an easy and pampered life. How can you talk about something you do not know? How dare you judge what I feel without having lived it?" retorted William, irate. "That's what you think," Henry exclaimed sadly. "I know what it means to lose hope of having what you most want in life. I know too well what it is to live without the love you want and need. I know, William, and it is partly thanks to you," he added with a sad and ironic smile. "What the hell are you talking about?" William asked, bewildered and impatient. "I'm talking about. I've always loved you, but not like a friend. I've loved you badly. I've loved you like a man is not supposed to love another man, more like a man is supposed to love a woman. My love for you is against nature," said Henry, trembling and holding back tears. William stepped back, again with his eyes open and an expression of surprise and horror on his face, as if the revelation had been a slap in the face for him. Then he put a hand on the mantelpiece and had to bend over, feeling the bile rising in his mouth as if he wanted to vomit. "I imagine you're disgusted, and I guess it's a surprise for you, although you should have suspected something. Maybe you chosen to ignore your suspicions, close your eyes to the signals," Henry said with bitterness and sadness, but with an ironic smile. "Shut up!" exclaimed William, disturbed. "My goodness, Henry! You're married and you have children, he added, turning to see him. And what other alternative do men like me have? Especially when you're the only male child and heir of a rich marquis. I had to get married, Henry replied. But your wife, does she know? William asked, scandalized. Yes, she is very intelligent and did not need much time to figure it out. We talked about it once and it was very painful, but I'm ashamed to say that she loves me, even though I do not deserve it. I love her too, my way. I love her as a friend, a sister, or a partner, and of course as the mother of my children. She tries to ignore my preferences as long as it does not interfere with our arrangement, and in return I try to have a marital life as normal as possible with her, even having physical intimacy with her at least a couple of times a week. We pretend to be happy, but the secret is always present among us, said Henry, feeling a strange relief when revealing his truth to William. My goodness, Henry. What does all this mean? You want me to marry your sister? Do you pretend to possess me through your sister? Is that your sick way of comforting and pleasing your frustrated desire, seeing me own your sister as if she were you? William asked in disgust. I am not so perverted, William, and if you understood what I feel you would know that seeing you in the arms of any woman will never make me happy. But it is true that your union would make me happy in another way, to see the two beings that I have loved the most in my life together. To see you two married would make me feel much happier and less frustrated, and feel that I am part of that a small part of that dream is the fruit of my love for you two would make me feel that my life makes more sense, Henry replied sadly and sweetly. You're crazy, Henry. If your sister is a pure and sweet girl like you say, are you thinking of giving her to a depraved and degraded man like me? Do you really think you're doing your sister some good by handing her over to a monster like me? It's absurd. The last time I saw Jane she was 5 years old, and now, how old is she? 16? I am much older than her, she could even be my daughter. Do you want to destroy her life by forcing her to join someone like me? Are not you terrified to think what will happen to her life if this nonsense happens? William asked, very disturbed and scandalized. Call me stupid, William, but I have faith. I have faith in you and in her, I have faith in the people I love. And if you do want to know, and if it does not make you want to vomit, know what a sodomite like me feels like for you. Henry said with some irony, making William shudder. My love for you is so great that I even allow myself to be selfish with my sister Jane, because I think you need her more than she needs you. Because I want to believe that all is not lost for you, because I have faith that you can still redeem yourself and save you from that darkness in which you live. Call me foolish, stupid, naive, but I have faith and I believe that Jane can heal your wounds and return you the desire to live, and if she gets you to be half the good, noble, and happy man you were in the past, then you too can make her immensely happy. Do not think I'm so noble, I'm just taking care my own peace and happiness. For 11 years there is not a single day that I have not suffered for you, for your pain, and the misfortune of my sister would be another suffering that could not stand. If you two are happy you will give me back the peace that now I do not have, added Henry, sincere and excited. You've lost your mind. You only say stupid things. I will not please your absurd fantasies and your ridiculous desires. William exclaimed furiously, gesturing and walking away from Henry a few steps. I must understand that the Duke of Wyre does not have honor? That you do not honor your word? I went very far for you. I sacrificed my honor and my principles, I became an accomplice of dishonorable and criminal acts, and I had to ignore my conscience. I had to keep a terrible and shameful secret for years for you. Henry yelled furiously. Do you threaten me with revealing the truth? Threaten to destroy me? Go ahead, I'm not afraid. William replied wrathfully. Damned stupid bastard. Do you think I would be able to betray you? After opening my heart and reveal my most shameful and intimate truth. I'd rather die than see you destroyed, son of a bitch. How can you offend me and hurt me that way? Henry replied almost hysterically, clenching his fists, trembling and with tears in his eyes. William saw him and shuddered again, and turned his gaze away, moved and ashamed. "I'll tell you again, and I do not care if you believe me or not, my sister and you are the beings that I have loved the most in my life. I'd rather die than hurt any of you, and I would rip out my damn heart if you ask me. Everything I said today is true, and if you cannot see the nobility of my intentions, then we'd better not see each other again in life. Do not worry, I will not blackmail you to force you to marry my sister. I do not even intend to insist that you honor your word. If you do not want to marry Jane, I will free you from your word, and rest assured that I will never ask you anything again, because, in fact, I will not communicate with you again for the rest of my life. I will dedicate myself to try to save my sister, either way, fleeing with her, protecting her from my father, but I will not ask you for help in that case. Now, Duke of Wyre, I beg you to forgive me for staying overnight in your house. Tomorrow morning my servant and I will leave," said Henry with his voice broken by emotion and tears in his eyes, and then left the room. He only goes to William. William watched him leave and then rested his two hands on the mantelpiece, and allowed the tears to fall from his eyes. The next day in the morning, Henry and Sam were preparing to leave, when William came to meet him in a room of the mansion. "I want to talk to you alone, Henry," said William, serious and tense. "What you have to say to me, you can say it in front of Sam. He is aware of everything, including the reason for this visit and absolutely everything I told you yesterday," Henry replied with a significant look, since he did not want Sam to retire because he was afraid that if he and William were left alone, an emotional outburst would push them to attack each other. William saw Sam a little surprised and shocked, suspecting that the young man was his friend's lover, while the servant bowed his head, embarrassed by the Duke's gaze. "Well, since you insist, before you leave, I need to ask you a question. Is your sister really an innocent girl like you say, or is she a shameless indecent?" William asked seriously, and with a hard gesture on his face. Henry reacted surprised and furious and grabbed William by the lapels of the suit. "I'll kill you if you use those words again when referring to Jane. If you do, we'll go outside and we'll fight a duel," Henry exclaimed with a murderous look. "Henry, no!" Sam exclaimed, holding Henry by one arm, a gesture that, along with the way to speak to Henry, calling him by his name, did not go unnoticed for William. "It's all I needed to know. I'll marry your sister," William replied. "What?" Henry asked, surprised. "I'll marry Jane. I swear it by the memory of my son Joseph. I will do it not only to honor my word but also to show you that I can repay the love and loyalty of the people who have given me their love without conditions, but now is not the time of emotions but of being practical. I imagine you have authorization from your father to offer me the hand of your sister in marriage, right?" said William, serene and firm. Yes, of course," Henry replied, bewildered while releasing William. "Well, in that case, everything is said. The wedding will have to be celebrated here in the north. I do not intend to travel to the south to get married. You will agree with me that the sooner the better, to end the scandal caused by the incident in your house," said William. "Of course, my father will not put many obstacles in the negotiation of the dowry," Henry replied. "I do not want any dowry," William replied. "My father will insist. You already know him. He will not want his friends to find out that he did not pay any dowry for his daughter, much less to marry you," said Henry. "Okay, we'll set a symbolic dowry. Henry, I cannot promise you that I'll love your sister or make her happy, but I promise that I'll respect her and give her the best possible life as my wife, and that I'll protect her and make everyone respect her, but do not ask me more. I still believe that her life will be a hell beside me. On the other hand, I cannot promise you that after last night our relationship is the same, but what I assure you is that I will never forget what you did for me and my son." "I think we have an agreement," said William, extending his hand. Henry shook his friend's hand, excited. "I understand, William. I have no right to ask you more." "Thank you very much," Henry replied without hiding the emotion as he shook William's hand. "Now you must leave, we must start things." I will start making the necessary arrangements. I think in a few days you must return with Jane and the rest of your family to celebrate the wedding as soon as possible. Tell your father that it will be a pleasure and it is an honor for me to receive you again as my guest, and we will negotiate the arrangements including the subject of the dowry face to face, said William kindly and serenely, but with an expressionless gesture. When Henry and Sam left, William met with his butler and his housekeeper. The housekeeper, Mrs. Arabella, was the butler's wife, Mr. Frank. She was a woman of medium height, barely a few years younger than her husband, a little chubby, white and red-haired, with a robust but kind face. She also dressed appropriately to be the housekeeper of a large house. The three of them were standing and William was in front of them, with a face so serious and moody that his two servants were a little intimidated. I wanted to tell you too, something very important. I'm going to get married, said William as if he were communicating bad news, as if he were telling them that he was ruined and that they were going to be unemployed. Frank and Arabella opened their eyes wide and their faces were covered with infinite surprise. Excuse me, Your Grace, did you say that? Frank asked, surprised and incredulous. Yes, you heard me well. I'm going to marry Lady Jane Roach, the daughter of the Marquis of Tidworth and sister of Lord Henry, William answered. The butler and the housekeeper exchanged a surprised look. Can we congratulate him, Your Grace? Frank asked. Of course, thanks Frank, William replied resignedly. I congratulate you sincerely, Your Grace, said Mrs. Arabella. Thank you, Mrs. Arabella, said William with kindness but suppressing his bad mood. In short, obviously we will have to make many arrangements and prepare for the wedding to be held here. I will have to talk to that drunkard of the pastor to officiate the wedding. I trust in you two to make a celebration worthy of the event, he added. Of course, Your Grace, said the butler and the housekeeper in a chorus. It will be necessary to make changes for the new Duchess. It will be necessary to hire a personal maid for the Duchess, who is in charge for helping her to dress and those things that the ladies do, said William a little annoyed. Excuse me, Your Grace, how old is the future Duchess? Frank asked with interest. I think she is 16 years old, answered William. Mrs. Arabella had to duck her head so that her gesture of terror and compassion for the future Duchess would not be seen. On the contrary, her husband, Frank, had to try to suppress a malicious smile. Erase that lascivious smile, you old rascal, I'm not a cradle robber, William said, a little annoyed to see his butler. Of course not, forgive me Your Grace, Frank said, a little intimidated, it's just that I think we have the perfect girl for the job. Do we have her? Puzzled Arabella asked her husband. Yes, we have her, Frank answered, seeing his wife with an angry look. Well, we'll see if that girl is suitable for the job. That's all for now, in a few days you will receive the pertinent instructions. Now I retire to the library and I do not want to be bothered, William said and made a move to leave. Excuse Your Grace, it's just that. I must ask that the ladies we hope will not come tonight, Frank asked timidly, referring to some of the prostitutes that William have hired. Why should not they come? William replied a bit angrily, and then he turned his back on them and left. As he left, the housekeeper crossed herself. Poor girl, to fall into the hands of that demon. Arabella exclaimed in a tone of censure and scandal. Shut up, stupid woman. That demon gives us to eat, and very well. My mother told me not to marry a Scottish woman unless with a Catholic. Frank replied to his wife. In the distance, the loud rumble of the library door was heard when William slammed the door. If you want to see the first chapters of this story, the links appear at the end of this video in the boxes or cards. And join our group.